What's going on, guys? So more whiteboard talk for you. I kind of enjoy doing this, but I kind of want to deep dive into something that was extremely popular that I did almost a year ago to date. So I wrote an article for Simply Faster called The Stress Scale, a new way to monitor athletes in the private sector setting, right? If you're a professional, collegiate, or even a really highly institutionalized high school where you can kind of control all the other variables, it's a lot easier to align your training with those other things. So if I'm a pro coach, I know, hey, they practice on these days, they train on these days, these are their off days. So I can kind of undulate my training accordingly. However, here in the private sector, not so much, right? I could have a group of kids who are playing basketball on the weekends, they come in and they didn't tell any of us, and the bar weight feels heavy to them, or it's not moving as fast, or the percentages that we're working are not adjusted accordingly, right? And we all know that as performance coaches, we are the managers of stress. That's all that matters. Everything revolves around stress, and can I make sure that my athletes feel good on certain days and can perform well on certain days. So the biggest issue that we face, like we talked about in the previous lecture, was that athletes they fluctuate, they're very seasonal. And then on top of that, they have lives outside of here, inside the private sector, right? And meaning they could be partying on the weekends, they could be emotional wreck, they could have all these different types of stress, and as a result, when they come in, we're trying to monitor them the best that we can. Furthermore, the body does not distinguish the difference between different stresses, right? If you got in a huge fight with your girlfriend and you guys are all ticked off, and then you literally put your phone in the cubby, you come in to train, right? That is a stress. So when you're warming up, you're not as dialed in, you don't feel as good, you maybe don't have that pop that we're looking for. Or if you're a basketball athlete and you just played in 5 AAU games on Sunday, I'm working with you on Monday, less than 24 hours, and I didn't know that. Obviously as a coach, I'm gonna ask those questions, but maybe unbeknownst to you, there were some just external things that were going on, and you couldn't really, and you can't really figure out why they're feeling this way or why they're not performing. So I had this big issue, and what I wanted to do was kind of compile different methods that already exist and utilize a stress scale that aligned with our performance training so that we knew that our athletes were performing optimally on the right days, right? So I kind of want to just deep dive here. Hopefully you guys can see this. I'm going to read it out loud to you and then just go over how you can be a great tool for you in the private sector or any coach for that matter. It just really simplifies things. And as you guys know, I love my systems, I love my whiteboards, so we're just going to deep dive here. Right? So the stress scale for athletes. This is a compilation of RPE of some of Dr. Mike Zatel's findings in terms of minimum effective dose, and I'm going to explain that, and then just traditional Prilepin's table, which has been around since the beginning of time. Right? But how can we put it all together? Well, I'm going to show you guys. So in this column here, if you guys can see, I have the training effect, the TE. I have 5 separate categories for my training effect. I have my percentage of my 1 rep max according to Prilepin's. I have my rate of perceived exertion, RPE, right? Earlier days of Mike Teixeira really popularized that with bar speed and VPT training. And then I have my fatigue management levels, my FML. And then I have my minimum effective dose and my maximum recoverable volume. So, percentage of my 1 rep max, right? What's the training effect? Well, if I go across the chart here, I have explosive, power speed, speed strength and hypertrophy, depending on the rep ranges, strength hypertrophy, and then strength and absolute strength. Percentages, 45 to 55%, 55 to 65, 65 to 75, 75 to 85, and then 85, 100 plus, right, if you're going for like a new PR, a new single. After that, we have our RPE. So if you guys like, I could show you here just a table that I created in terms of where it lines up and just using other people's tables as well, of course, and what it kind of equates to from an RPE to percentage-based standpoint. So 2 to 3 is for explosive, feels super light. And RPE is on a scale of 1 to 10, right? 1 being absolute, super easy like the bar, 10 being like a bone-crushing new 1 rep max. You could not do it another time. Power and speed is 3 to 4. Our speed strength hypertrophy is 5 to 6. We have strength hypertrophy 7 to 8 on the RP scale. And then like I said, strength and absolute is 8 to 10. So maybe you're hitting a double at maybe 90% would be like an all-time new PR if you're a more advanced athlete. Or for some of our younger guys, right, it's going to scale a little bit. So our fatigue management levels, our FML. This number here represents how the athlete is feeling. So I like to use it in conjunction with the RPE. I use percentages, but again, unless you're working with top athletes where percentages really do matter, RPE is great because at any given day, hence the stress scale, right, your athletes could be feeling accordingly. So when they come in or we're warming up, right, I'll give an example later, but it's like, how did that feel? I load the next weight up. How did that feel? I load the next weight up, right, and I make adjustments accordingly. And I know that, okay, my FML is at 2 to 3. Well, how would I know that? Because I'm working, this is my training effect for the day, you know, hypertrophy, let's say. So I'm working at 70% for 3 sets of 8 reps today. Well, on RPE, how'd that feel? The athlete says, 5 to 6, awesome. I now know your fatigue is at a 2 to 3 on a scale of 1 to 5. Now, my minimum effective dose, this is also based off of Prilepin's chart. And if you know, right, this is the target range of reps that you're hitting within that percentage or you're hitting within that RPE. So if I know I'm working for power and speed, I know that the RP should be 3 to 4, pretty easy. My fatigue level should be pretty down just because it's not, right, as systemically fatiguing. And then I'm hitting this minimum effective dose, anywhere between 12 and 24 reps, right, accordingly based on your athlete. Again, it's very fluid. It works for any athlete, novice, intermediate, or advanced. Now, my maximum recoverable volume, my MRV. This is what I feel the athlete can increase by percentages of the total load being used for the day, or not even. You could even use just the absolute target number that they're using for that day. For example, obviously, if I'm working between 45 and 55%, I know I can increase by maximum of 15%, right? I know they're capable of a lot more. So based off of how they feel, what the bar speed is in terms of RPE, I can adjust accordingly from week to week. Now, power and speed, about 5 to 10%. Speed, strength, hypertrophy, 5 to 7%, and then obviously it makes its way down, right? Strength, hypertrophy, 7.5 to 5%. Strength and absolute strength, 2.5 to 0%. Obviously, if you're at your maximum threshold, there's not a lot of room for improvement until you go back to basics and you kind of build up your training again. Now, let's put this into practice, right? So I'm throwing a lot of information at you guys, but it's like, all right, let's put this into practice. So I'm going to give you kind of a quick example here of how I would use it. So here's an example, right, of the stress scale for athletes. Let's say the athlete squats 315. You tested, you have it marked down, right? So Johnny squats 315. Well, for today, we're going to do 3 by 5 at 75%, RP 7. That equates to 240. Great. So he gets in, we do our movement prep, we do our dynamic warm-up. He feels pretty good. He's ready to squat. Do the bar for 10. We're going to do 135 for 10 at 50%, RPE 4, right? So I know, okay, the speed levels still feel pretty good. He then does 185 for 5 to 8 at 60%, RPE 5, okay, still feeling all right. Now he does 225 for 5 at 70%, but his RP felt at 7.5 to 8. Well, that's pretty high, because if I look over here, 7 to 8 puts me outside of the range that I wanted to be in for the day, right? So now I'm thinking, okay, well, what can I do here? If it feels really heavy, and it's not even moving that fast, now you have 2 options. This is the beauty of the stress scale. So it felt like an RPE, like I said, at 70%, and we really want it to be more like 6 to 7 RP. So like I said, you have 2 options. Option number 1, you can go down back to 225 and hit your minimum effective dose for that day at that given percentage. So you know he got the appropriate amount of work in for that day, what he could handle on that day. Or you could go up to 240. You could go up to 240, but you're gonna know that's gonna jack his FML or his fatigue level up to 3 as opposed to 1 to 2, which we were kind of looking for the day. So I come out over here, okay, I know he's gonna hit 240. Well, in my minimum effective dose, I'm gonna go on the lower end of the scale. So if he's all the way up in this range, I might only hit 2 by 5 or a 1 by 5. That's it, right? So I'm still at that target range, but I'm not hitting the enough volume that I wanted to due to his higher fatigue levels, right? Here's the caveat though that we know. FML, or fatigue management level, overall intensity does not always create the most stress, right? Let's use the RP again. If I hit a single at 80% or RP 5, just because I'm working at higher intensities, doesn't mean I'm going to cause the most systemic stress. We all know that 4 by 10 at 60% is going to blow you up way more than it would if you were just hit that one single and then maybe do a little bit more back off work. Because we all know that overall volume can cause stress as well. So fatigue management level is not perfect. I would say it's the one thing that, if anything on this, is where I could kind of adjust a little bit. But it does give you a good idea, right? You do know if you're working at explosive here, 45 to 55% according to Prilepins, and your RP is very low, you know your fatigue's probably pretty low because you feel good, you're moving the bar weight fast. And obviously, they work synonymously, so it's a sliding scale here. Why is this so great for performance work? Well, because everything else should fit in around your speed and power work. If you want to maximize speed and power, well, you can't have your strength work take precedent over this. And I see a lot of coaches make this mistake, is they try to push the boundaries of their strength work and their performance work, right? And if you end up trying to chase a rabbit with two tails, right, you end up with none. So again, it's all about how can I manage my strength based around my performance. So if I'm feeling super good on that given day, well then I can kind of adjust accordingly with the stress scale. So again, I hope this helps you out. If you guys have any questions, comments, or if you just think it's a bunch of BS, just let me know. I want to know how I can improve it and how I can help you guys in the private sector work with your athletes. Thanks, guys.